We're wrapping up our series in prayer based out of the book of Exodus. And I really hope that it's been something that has proven itself effective for you, that you've gained not just more knowledge, but that knowledge is actually translated into some heart action, that it's fueling your prayer life, which is what it meant to be. And we've got one more language that we're going to take a look at, and it's the language of prompting, where God prompts us. And it's a language that that involves your internal clock. You got to get a sense of timing, and you got to sort of take a look at what's happening around you and discerning God's voice in the midst of real time as he plays it out in your life and around your life. So it's the language of prompting, or where God begins to stir in your life. Now, I just want to kick off with with a question. If you can think back, if you went to university and you can think about those days, what's the worst thing, one of the worst things that you could do as a student during exam time? Answer: sleep through your exam. Well, my wife did that, and she slept through an exam, and this was an incredible moment as I watched it unfold. She got up. We lived off campus, so she drove to the campus, tracked down the professor, and she began to, just ask for another opportunity, say how sorry she was for missing the exam that morning. And the professor just smiled, and he said, "Marion, actually, the exam was yesterday morning." And and then to which Marion, in typical Marion style, she just started to laugh. She's like, I have nothing else to say. And she just kind of smiled, laughed, and then she said, "Well, I'm just asking for grace." And the guy goes, "Yeah, you could take it." And I was just like, wow, how did that happen? She smiled, that beautiful smile of hers, and her eyes twinkled, and the guy just said, "Sure." If it would have been me, it'd have said, "Get a louder alarm clock." I mean, but she slept through it. I think when it comes to the prompting of God's voice and discerning God's voice and what he wants to do and how he's stirring in your life, sometimes we spiritually sleep right through it. We sleep right through it. We just kind of gloss over it, and then later on we look back and we go, "Oh my gosh, I missed it. I missed it. I missed a moment. I missed an opportunity in which God presented for me a moment where I could have responded." So that's what we're going to talk about today, and we're going to try to give us some helpful understanding around what it means to discern and respond to God's timing. And you've heard me mention it's going to require that you and I get in touch with an internal clock so that we can discern his whisper, and we can capture the minutes and the moments that can actually translate into defining moments. So when you look into the New Testament will give you, in the Greek, it will give you two definitions for the word time. The first one is chronos. Chronos, of which you and I would get the word chronology. It refers to everything having to do with clock and calendar. So it is all about counting minutes. Counting minutes. So therefore, it's quantitative. The other word is kairos. Kairos. Kairos is different because it is about opportune time. Opportune time. It's about seizing moments that are presented. So it's, instead of being quantitative, it's qualitative. It's where you and I would get the phrase quality time. it's quality time. And these kairos moments are those moments that present themselves in which it's an intersection of time, place, and people. It's a divine intersection between the supernatural and the natural, between eternal and temporal. It's this incredible convergence where things happen in the moment that have defining ripples throughout your life and the lives of those around you. Paul actually takes it a little bit further in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 15. He says this. He's talking about how you and I as believers are to make the most of our time. He says this, look carefully how you walk, not as unwise, making the best use of time because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is. It's discerning the moments that God has for us. What this literally means, what Paul is literally saying is redeem time. Redeem time. Make the most of it. The minutes that you have, the chronos minutes that you have, look for ways in which you can see the moments that God has tucked into the minutes and make the most of it. So Paul is saying to the Ephesian church, actively take advantage of your minutes so that you can maximize the moments of which God will unfold in your life. Kairos. Redeem it all. I don't know about you, but you can look back, and the older you get, the more you can look back, because you have actually a lot more time to look back, and you go, gosh, how much time did I waste? How much time did I just sit around doing things that I thought, it was just such a missed opportunity. And you look back at moments where God was unfolding, and you actually have these 20/20 spiritual hindsight moments where you look back and you go, missed that. I must humbly confess, I think I probably missed more than I actually discerned and grabbed a hold of and seized in the moment. And a moment like that, an opportunity missed, an opportunity lost is an opportunity cost. We missed a moment that could have really had some defining impact on our lives and in the lives around us. So we're called to redeem time. We're called to listen. We're called to hear those prompting words, those whispers of God, the stirring within our hearts. And I want you to see an intersection that takes place in the book of Exodus that comes right at the beginning. It's this intersection of time, place, and people. The time was in the period Egypt was a superpower. Israel was a doormat in slave labor to Egypt. And in this particular time frame, they had a Pharaoh who had issued a death sentence to all children Luke's age and younger. Does it sort of put it into perspective? Oh, wow. See, when you read the Bible, you kind of like read over that. No. Luke would have been under a death sentence, and anyone born after him. That is the time frame. But then you have a real-time moment at a river, that's the place, the Nile River, with some significant people in this Kairos moment. Let me read chapter 2, verse 1. Now a man from the house of Levi went and he took as his wife, a Levite woman. The woman conceived and bore a son. Listen, that was like dangerous. you literally had to be thinking about, hey, if we're gonna have an intimate moment here, this could translate to death. She conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. That took faith. She was supposed to take him to the river and cast him in and drown him. When she could hide him no longer, she took for him a basket made of bulrushes and daubed it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child in it and placed it among the reeds by the riverbank. You know what this is? It's symbolic of an ark. It's like a little mini Noah's Ark. Instead of 2 by 2, there was just one baby. And she pushes it off. Can you imagine doing that as a mom? And his sister, Miriam, his sister stood by at a distance to know what would be done to him. Gosh, thank you, Lord, for older sisters who watch over us. Now the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river. So now, here's the deal. Here's the real-time moment. It's tubby time. It's bath time at the river. But who is coming for the tubby time? The princess of Pharaoh, the one who issued the edict that all Hebrew sons should die. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her servant woman, and she took it. And when she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby was crying. She took pity on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." Then his sister, Miriam, boldly, courageously shows up and says to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call a nurse from the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you?" And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." So the girl went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child away and nurse him for me." Salvation. "And I will give you your wages." Remuneration. That's good. You're getting paid to nurse your own child from the king's daughter who said, "I'm going to kill him." Do you see the Kairos moment? So the woman took the child and nursed him, and when the child grew up, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses because she said, "I drew him out of the water." That's what his name means. Kairos moment. The time, tubby time at the river. The place, the Nile River, a place that should have signified death, ends up becoming salvation. The people, a mom who is unwilling to cast her child into the river, and in faith nurses the baby, hides him, and then even creates a little ark and sets it up, and then all of a sudden the ark goes into the current. And then at just the right place, the basket goes to the side, into the bank, into the reeds, and into the bulrushes. At just the right time, when Pharaoh's daughter and all of her servants come down to bathe, and she sees the basket, she's curious, she sends somebody to go get it, and then she opens the basket to see a baby boy, one of the Hebrews, crying, and she sees the tears, and she takes pity. Here's where you and I start to see all the different people. And then Miriam, the older sister, comes and says, "Shall I get you," before she even has time to think, "Shall I get you a nurse from the Hebrew women, so that you can nurse the child?" Yes, go. Do you know why the princess was moved? Because I'm here to tell you that God's Kairos moment began with tears. The tears of a baby started this ripple effect of a defining moment that caused the deliverance for a baby, for a family, for a generation, and for a nation. It had massive, massive ripples of God's purpose being played out in this Kairos intersection. And I'm here to tell you that you and I need to understand, and you and I need to get better at hearing and listening and responding to the voices of God in these promptings and in these stirrings, so that we can see in the moment something happening that actually goes far beyond who we are. That's what was going on here. And as I said, I think we miss more than we actually grab a hold of. And so I want to help us gain an understanding of what that looks like. I don't know if you've ever heard of the archer's paradox. The archer's paradox is this. When somebody's got a target and they've got their bow and their arrow, and they don't always go aim directly at the bullseye. Actually, if they do, they could probably miss the bullseye, which is ultimately the aim, the goal. So instead, they have to factor all the variables, and they have to adjust accordingly. This is the archer's paradox. So there might be a crosswind. So if there's a crosswind blowing from right to left, they might have to then move the bow to compensate, to send it in and let the wind take it into. Or if it's distance, they might actually have to raise the bow and aim the arrow so that it goes up higher and falls down at the target, at the place in which they aim. So the paradox is you don't necessarily aim right at the target. You might have to be off center or above to be able to understand the variables so that you can actually hit what you're trying to hit. What I'm trying to say in terms of hearing the whispers of God is you and I need to consider the variables. It's all about the ability to evaluate and adjust to the voice of God in defining this moment of Kairos as it's tucked into the minutes of the Chronos. It's figuring out. So let me explain it a little bit. There are some people can come and go, they hear God say, I want you to, he puts a word on somebody's heart, and then you go, and without kind of praying through it, timing, you just come up to the person, you go, I have a word for you, and boom, you blast it. Have you ever been on the receiving end of that? Just don't sit in the front row. Because I'm going to tell you, because Mary and I can get some of those, where people are like, and in their wonderful enthusiasm and in their wonderful excitement that they have a word, they can come and they can just blast you with a word. And you're like, whoa, hang on. And, I'm just like trying to think about what I just said and where we're going, and somebody's got, or somebody walks up and you just respond in the moment. That's great. You get a word, but you might not necessarily need to respond in the moment. You might need to just pray through and say, when do I deliver this message? When do I deliver this encouragement? Well, how do I phrase this? And think and consider. Or you've ever heard the phrase, man, it's like somebody can really read a room. Somebody can really read a room. Jesus was amazing at reading a room. He picked up on things that nobody else picked up on. Like, he could read a room like no other. He'd be in a room having a dinner. He's reading what's going on, and everybody else thinks they have a read on Jesus. And then all of a sudden, there's not even a knock at a door, but a prostitute from the town comes in and breaks into the dinner party and then just starts to wash Jesus' feet. Awkward. And everybody's like, what's going on? And Jesus just allows her to do it. And everybody around the room is like, does he not get who that is? Does he not understand who it is that is touching his feet? Does he not know who and what she is about? Jesus has completely read it. He reads the moment. He reads the scene. They were judging. See, that's what I'm talking about. You read the moment, and he's reading the moment, and he allows her to wet his feet with her tears and dry them with her hair, and then to break out extremely expensive perfume over his feet. And everybody's going, you're missing it. And Jesus is going, you're missing it. Because what she's doing is a beautiful act of worship. What you're doing is sitting back in judgment and judging her. Because she, as Jesus goes on to say, she knows she loves much because she knows that she's been forgiven much. What you don't know is that you love little. Therefore, because you don't really understand how much you've been forgiven. It's just, he reads the room. See, when it comes to hearing the prompting voices of God, and when it hears the whispers, and it's about understanding the time, understanding the people, understanding the room, understanding when it is, how it is that we are to either call to action or to give a word or to make a course directional change. That's what discernment is all about. It's considering all of the variables and literally asking God to say, is this the time? Timing is everything. In my 20s and 30s, Marion could give you plenty of opportunities to give witness to this. I was that person who was, I had one gear, and it was fifth gear, pedal to the floor, and I was always out in front of God going, would you hurry up, please? I'm doing your work. Would you hurry up so you can bless this? And I was always moving ahead of God. And God would be sitting back. I could just picture Jesus going, oh, God love you, Glenn. You just are doing it again. You love to get out ahead of me. You are such a lovable fool. I love you, but you have not yet learned how to keep in step with me. So some of you might be on the other side. You tend to be on the cautious side. And God is calling you to do something. God is calling you to give that word. God is calling you and prompting you to make this move. And you kind of I just need to think about it. I just need to process this more. Millennials love to process. God bless you. We're processing. Like you'll be in the middle of a conversation. You're talking. I got to pause. I got to process that for a minute. I'm like, wait, we're in a conversation here. But it's like, okay, process. But then respond. And so you might be lagging behind. Listen, I'm going to tell you right now, in the earlier gathering and in this gathering and in the gathering tonight, I'm here to tell you that there might be some of you in this room that God is calling you into full-time ministry and you've been lagging back. He might even be calling you to a different country. And you're going, no, that's not me. Yeah, you got somebody else. I'm just not qualified. Am I qualified? What qualifications do I have to pastor and lead a church in Johannesburg, South Africa in 2019? I've got none. But I have a call from God. And I answered. And he's working out the details. So you might be lagging behind. You might be like me, way out in front. And in the New Testament, Paul says, find out, keep in step with the Spirit. Walk alongside of Jesus. Hang on and go on the journey with him. It's an incredible adventure. Don't go ahead. Don't lag behind. Keep in step. And you need to consider the variables. Let me give you a couple examples of this, of just how sometimes prompting is, it's immediate. You need to respond. You need to react right in the moment. And others play out over time. So I remember Marion and our kids were packing to go. She was going to take our kids to travel from Atlanta, Georgia to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which is about over 1,000 Ks, a 10-hour plus drive. And so I packed the car because I have the spiritual gift of packing. And so I really do. I got to be honest with you. And so I packed the car. It was awesome. It was all great. We had all the snacks arranged and the bottles and everything. It was all great. All she had to do is it had the car, all fueled up, ready to roll. And prayed, kissed her, off she goes. And then I went to work. And this is before cell phones, right? Remember those days? And so she's driving north. I go to the office. I had a habit. I worked on the staff of this church, and it had a chapel. I felt like it was my own personal chapel. I got annoyed when other people came in. But I shared because I had to. It's part of my job description. And so I'm praying, and I'd sing in there and do whatever. And then I finished up, and I came back to my office and started my day and started working. And then probably about 20 minutes into my office time, I got a prompt. I can't describe. I've never heard the audible voice of God. But it was that tug in your heart. You need to pray for Marion. But I just did. You need to pray for Marion. And I felt moved actually to go back to the chapel. I don't know why, but I did. So I went back and I knelt down and I started praying and I started thinking about, Lord, I didn't have any specifics. I just started generally praying. So I just started thinking, Lord, just give Marion patience. As these three children say, how much further? I just started doing that and keep her alert, keep her awake, be with her, give her kind of the endurance to follow. And then all of a sudden, I'm not a guy who gets visions. But while I was praying, as the Spirit of God prompted me, I got a vision. So this is like, I'm telling you, and it was in the moment, so I had responded, and the vision was simply this: a white minivan traveling south as my wife is traveling north, just veers off and goes down the median and comes across and smashes in, and there's this explosion. Oh my gosh, I knew what to pray. So I prayed like I'd never prayed before in my life. And stuff like this is like, it wasn't like, oh, this happens every day. So I start to really pray for their protection. I start to pray, Lord God, that this would not be the reality. And I just kept praying. And I prayed for a solid 30 minutes. And as quick as the prompting came at the beginning, there was just this incredible peace that came over me. And it was like, I don't need to pray anymore. I no sooner went back into my office. 30 seconds of chronos happened. The phone rings. It's Marion calling from a payphone. Remember those? She goes, I go, is everything all right? Why are you calling me? Everything's fine. I just need to ask you a question. I was like, well, did you forget something? She said, no, I didn't forget anything. She said, I just need to know, did you pray for me? I'm like, well, of course I prayed for you. I pray for you every day. No. Did you just pray for me? So I'm not wanting to, say what I had envisioned. I said, yes, I did. I felt really led to go and pray for you. So I've been praying for you for literally the last 30 minutes. What did you pray? Yeah, so you're like Sherlock Holmes here. So I said, okay, well, and I hesitated on saying what I prayed because it's a little bit kind of, so I told her what I prayed, and then she said, I'm not kidding you, about 5 to 10 minutes ago, a white minivan came across. It just veered off the highway, came down through the median, and it came past, and it just missed us. Yeah. A 1,000 Ks to the north, at the very exact time that I was prompted to pray, my mother-in-law, Fran, was led to pray, and she saw a very similar vision, and she prayed for protection. So what was happening in this time and in this place and with the people that are involved was a kairos moment to respond to, in which then God protects, and now we have a story to glorify God, how he brought and moved and orchestrated a moment that it was not coincidental, it wasn't a twist of fate, it was providence. And God wants to show you that he's in charge of the time of your life. He knows the day of your birth, and he knows the day of your exit from this earth. And you and I are to manage all the rest of the chronos in between. And as we manage it, we also need to be praying through to hear and listen to the kairos moments that God has to show you that he is in charge and he's overruling of your time and the places and the people that come in to your life, so that he can create defining moments that will have ripples effects in your life and in the lives of others. My question is, are we listening in? Because God is saying, I am the God of every one of your minutes. And I want to rule and overrule in all of your moments. Isn't that good? Isn't that good? Isn't that comforting? So there's two critical aspects of discernment: hearing and obeying. Hearing and obeying. There's moments in which you and I obviously need to hear, but those same moments we need to respond to. So I had to respond to a prompting from God in the moment to pray for Mary and my kids. But then there's other moments where I hear God speaking. He's stirring. I don't even know how to describe it. He just kind of stirs within me. But he's not calling me to immediate action, immediate moving forward. It's just like, let this kind of marinate in your soul. Let it stir, like kind of a poiky. Just let it go all day long. Are you pretty impressed with that? It just came in the moment. Thank you, Lord. I'm so culturally relevant. I remember the first time somebody said that, a poiky. I said, a whaty? And then they spelled it. It's like a pachi. What? What's a pachi? A poiky. Let it percolate. Let it stew. Because God's not ready to unfold it. So literally, I had been praying, and I knew that God was stirring me. This is back when I was living in Birmingham, Alabama, and God was stirring my heart for this country. Again. But I knew that I should not and I could not mention this to my family. It wasn't time. They weren't ready to hear it, and I didn't know details, and God, but I listened, and I kept listening to the stirring. 2 years later, Mary and I were part of a church planting ministry. And some good friends of ours, he's a surgeon, and he pulled us into it. And this is what started all these medical mission trips all around the world, Peru, Sudan, wherever else. And then we started doing veterinarian medical missions, using that as a platform to then share the gospel. So we were at this worldwide conference in Dallas, Texas. And we were going to meet our friends for dinner, and we had just finished a couple sessions, and Mary and I went to this restaurant a little bit earlier to have a little bit of happy hour. She looked at me and she said, "What are you thinking about all this?" I said, "No, it's really exciting, and I love the fact that people are all around the world doing what they need to be doing." She looked at me as only a wife could do, and she said, "Are you thinking about South Africa?" I couldn't even speak. Tears started streaming down my face. And just like the tears of Moses that spoke to the princess, my tears of God stirring spoke to Marion. And so now we started, and she looked, and I think she said something like this, "Well, I think we need to start praying about this." That was my sign that said, okay, we're moving forward. So some promptings happen in the moment, and others take and unfold over months and even years. But know this: when you respond to the whispers of God's prompting and his slow stirring, it will have unbelievable defining moments in your life and in the lives of those around you. And God is about redefining generations and nations. It's way bigger than us. We just want to define moments. God wants to define generations and nations. And now is the time. Here is the time. And he is calling us in this kairos moment as a church to say, where am I going to show up? Where am I going to show up and do the things, speak the words, change even the course of maybe even my career for a kingdom that will far outlast this world? So that my response to the kairos will actually have an eternal ripple in a generation and leave a legacy that could actually change a nation. A little baby in a kairos moment ended up 80 years later leading people from slavery to freedom. Don't underestimate the tears of a baby and what God can do in a moment. Let's stand and pray.